to be able to move products, to be able to move robots and manufacture something and really transform industry, or really how humanity functions. It's something that I think it's really exciting to be a part of. So.
Hi, how's it going? I'm your host, Malachi Greb, and also owner CEO of Elite Automation. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're interested in any automation related content, any manufacturing related content. We're talking about, where's automation going, where's manufacturing going, the different things that we're seeing as we go into many different manufacturing facilities. We're getting, a wide exposure to the amount of manufacturers that are out there in the world, and from all different types. So we get to experience a huge amount of what's actually going on behind the scenes in manufacturing. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, all the things that all the influencers talk about. So we have a special guest today, Kudzai. How's it going?
Me, it's great to be here on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. Glad to have you. So I guess if you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and start off by telling people what you have going on in your career and what you have cooking up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so maybe I'll start off with a brief introduction of myself. So Kudzai Manditereza. I'm a developer advocate at HiveMQ, and I'm also a founder of Industry 4.TV. So at HiveMQ, basically what I do is I create content around industrial IoT to help solution architects, automation engineers, and developers to adopt industrial IoT solutions, particularly using MQTT and things like Spark. And then on my channel, I have got a podcast, and I also do tutorials on industrial IoT, talking about protocols, smart manufacturing, and all the likes. And yeah, so it's really interesting for me to be here on this show today to kind of like talk about my journey in the manufacturing space. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on, and especially too, you're in a very technical field, and a lot of people probably don't even really know what MQTT is. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of give the audience like a brief description of what MQTT is, and also what Internet of Things are.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of definitions of IoT out there. So I would not try and come up with a formal definition of it. But essentially, what it is the fact that, I mean, up until in the early 2000s or so, we only had humans or human beings being the ones that are actually able to connect to the internet and share information and interact. But then now, with the advancement of technologies, objects are now able to independently connect over the internet and share information. And that scenario has kind of like necessitated a lot of use cases with things such as home automation, things like industrial IoT, and all the stuff that you mostly hear about around wearables and all that kind of stuff. So it's two different sectors that are currently experiencing this explosion of IoT. So there's the commercial side of it, which is just like IoT, which is where things like home automation falls into. And then there's the industrial IoT, which is more in the manufacturing sector. So this is where this idea of connecting objects and devices over the internet to exchange information with backend applications such as advanced analytics like AI. This is where this really has like a huge economic incentive, like really the even the potential to transform an entire nation's industrial base, right? Just by the sheer amount of productivity that could be derived out of connecting these systems. So central to that movement of data between applications, people, machines, PLCs, robotics, and so on, is the ability to exchange information in a seamless and open and standardized way. So this is where things like MQTT comes into the picture. So MQTT basically is a communication protocol that allows that interchange of information between devices and systems to create what we call the Internet of Things. And to maybe paint a picture for some of you who might be familiar with legacy protocols like HTTP, which currently dominate even today's internet communication. So this is where when you actually communicating or exchanging information between two parties using HTTP, you have got this direct connection between these two participants, so they can only exchange information when they are like coupled in space and time, meaning that they need to know each other's location in terms of IP address, and also they need to have that exchange of information happening synchronously, right? So the idea of MQTT is to decouple that and put a broker in the middle, kind of like a mediator, to act as a medium for coordinating exchange of information among all these participants without them having to establish direct connection. So that obviously has advantages that it allows you to like create a scalable system where you can keep on adding more and more devices without worrying about the network resources or computer processing resources and things like that. So in a nutshell, that's what IoT, industrial IoT, and MQTT is all about.
That's awesome. And honestly, it's like it's the future of automation. It's the future of manufacturing. It's the future of our world, right? I think that over the course of probably the next 5 years, we'll see more of the home technologies getting integrated more into manufacturing. It's something that we're kind of interested in doing at some point in time, where we're taking some of the other smart products that may be used on a consumer basis, and how do we couple those with manufacturing, Internet of Things and robotics and things along those lines.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I when I speak to most system integrators, because I mean, with as with any technologies, you kind of get resistance, like from some professionals who say, okay, we're just gonna continue doing it the way that we've always been
Mm-hmm.
doing it, and or maybe they just say this is just buzzwords. This is we've heard this before, and what I always say that this is different because now, as you alluded to, we've got this new set of tools that a lot of professionals who are not in industrial automation are already familiar with, things coming from the home,
Mm-hmm.
internet, your routers, your gateways, your low code programming platforms. You now have all of these moving into the industrial space. And with it, that brings a new breed of system integrators, people who would otherwise have not even entertained the thought of working in the industrial space. But because there's these tools that they are now familiar with, that they're excited about, that will drive a lot of talent, a lot of system integrators into that space, and obviously that becomes competition. So it's really imperative that you, as a system integrator, you kind of like start educating yourself around
Mm-hmm.
all these tools, all these technologies that are being introduced into this space. So it's really interesting to see all of this unfolding.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's something that companies have to adapt to. It's like it may have been around for like the past 20 years, but really it's like the past 5 years that really there's a lot more smart devices that are on the market. You can get a lot more smart sensors that give you a lot more data. Like these things have really kind of exploded over the past 5 years with the amount of devices that are available and the amount of data you can get from those devices.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And really, the drivers here are the fact that the manufacturers, like if you are a system integrator or you are working in the industrial automation space, really the people that you are serving are the manufacturers who really want to uh, get an economic benefit out of whatever manufacturing activity or operations they are conducting. And there's going to be a lot of manufacturing companies that are going to adopt this technology and gain a competitive advantage over the ones that are still lagging behind. And it's going to become
Mm-hmm.
clear in a few years' time who is leading and who's lagging. And then that also, in a way, creates an opportunity for you as an automation engineer to kind of like be in the driving seat, whether you're working in-house within a manufacturing company or you're working for a system integrator, to really drive the change. And because there's risk there that you're going to obviously to be left out, because there's a real opportunity to gain some economic benefit out of industrial IoT, particularly for manufacturing companies.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your first like taste or flavor of Internet of Things? Where did it start for you?
Yeah. So, well, for me, it's a It's a very interesting story. So I've got a background in system integration. So back in South Africa. So I'm currently based in Germany right now. But before I moved over, I was based in South Africa, and I was doing some system integration stuff, working with things like up to 22. That was my primary hardware that I was using for automating plants. And so I was basically like called in to automate a plant, like just uh, they used to do things manually, just going to the silos and using like a mallet just to tap it and see how much of the stuff is left in there. So all they needed to do was just to kind of like monitor that and see. But they
Yeah.
still, while we were kind of like working with that system, I used to see a lot of these operators just standing around and then waiting. And then when I spoke to them, they would tell me that no, we're waiting for a truck, right? So a truck to deliver the supplies. And it
Mm,
was really strange to me that they would down their tools for like about 4 hours just waiting for that delivery. And the reason why
mm,
was because the way that they could order stuff was not automated. They'd wait for the supervisor
yeah.
to come and check and see, oh, now we're sitting at 20%. And then they go and make a phone call, they order. And then it so happened that at times, they had
Yeah.
no trucks at the depot. They had to wait for a truck that had gone out to come back and then do that uh, feeling. So now this is where really for me I got the first opportunity to really apply Internet of Things there, because this is where we kind of like proposed that we could have a connected system that does automatic calculation and prediction of exactly when some material will be needed to prevent that downtime, and have that
Hmm.
information automatically relayed to the suppliers to have their own dashboard where they can see what's going on, and then they can plan their day around that. So that ability to connect, to collect information and share it between a supplier and a manufacturer, and essentially cut out that downtime to zero, was like really
Yeah.
for me a very interesting and first time that I really applied Internet of Things. Before that, it was really kind of like a hobby thing, like typically home automation, which was really fascinating for me, obviously, to see things go on and off just using your mobile phone, or even when you're not at home, you get a notification that this and this is going on and stuff like that. So those basically were the first, my first experience with Internet of Things that really fascinated me.
Yeah, I think it's a great first experience that you had there because it's kind of one of like the most rudimentary like Internet of Things and how it can like very easily and like practically be used in a real world scenario where it immediately helps your process. Because there's definitely a whole side of Internet of Things that's like more data analytics. It's more like predictive things, and it gets pretty deep out there, right? But there's some things that are like right here, right now, that if you add it, it's gonna eliminate a ton of downtime in your processes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's totally correct. I mean, and also it speaks to the way that industrial Internet of Things is being marketed, which kind of like puts maybe a bad name of industrial IoT, because uh, that's what I also talk to with a lot of system integrators, that it's very critical for you to identify a pain point and not just sell IoT just for the sake of selling it, right? But to really identify and know what manufacturers are currently struggling with, and use Internet of Thing as a tool to solve that specific problem. You start from there,
Mhm.
because a lot of integrators, their approach is to kind of like create this problem and then present IoT as a solution of a problem that they do not know whether it's a real problem that exists. But you could learn a lot by speaking to manufacturers and understanding what it is that they're actually struggling with, and find opportunities where you could actually apply Internet of Things to solve those problems. So that's where really IoT has got the power to really transform the way that manufacturing is done. If you are focused on solving a specific problem, than just kind of saying, okay, we're just going to collect this data, we're just going to chuck it in the cloud, and we'll see what happens. It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that there would be even more like encouragement on the Internet of Things if there were more people who were just um, targeting those kind of like lower hanging fruit and those things that you can actionably collect the data on and then solve whatever the problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Totally agree.
So I'm kind of curious on your transition from South Africa to Europe. That's where you're at right now, Europe.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's
How, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, so for me, as I mentioned before, I was into industrial system integration, and then I started obviously when I like before I got into industrial system integration, I was into embedded systems design, working like a really low level programming microcontrollers, and then I did a bit of software web programming. So when I went into manufacturing, well, for me, it really struck me how there was still a lot of stuff that was being done manually, paper-based record keeping and all that kind of stuff. And that's really for me what really drove me to kind of like try and investigate to find out what I mean. I was sure that there could be a better way of doing this, and as I started to explore that, this is where really the idea of Internet of Things and all of this information about MQTT protocols, IoT started to show up, and that was back in 2012, 2013, and I started to learn more about industrial IoT, and one of the ways of learning was to create content and teach, right? So I started putting a lot of content out there. First, it was articles, and then I moved on to create a YouTube channel, and then I created a podcast and started to create some videos. And so, obviously, this is not really a very big community. It's a small community of ours. So this is where I kind of like came across Dominic, the CTO of HiveMQ, and we were connected for a while. He was a guest on my podcast once, and then from there, I then moved on to start to create content for HiveMQ. Before I joined permanently, I actually created content for them as a freelancer, and then eventually I then moved to join HiveMQ permanently. This is when I made that move from South Africa to Germany, and for me it was really an interesting position and still is because I see it really for me as a position that I really crafted for myself because I get to do what it is that I was already doing independently, but now I'm doing it under the umbrella of HiveMQ because it's the things that I believe in and it's the technology that I believe in. I was already a huge evangelist around MQTT and IIoT, so to get to do it under an umbrella of a company like HiveMQ is something that I really enjoying doing a lot. So it's a really interesting position for me.
Yeah, I think that definitely, as far as like being a content creator, that a lot of times it can relieve like a lot of stress, and you can like focus on like more of like just the creative side of things whenever you have like a bigger organization that can support your financial needs and allow you just to focus on the content creation part of things.
Exactly. That's really fundamental, and because a big part of content creation, as you would know, really involves a lot of research. Trying out some things and see what works, and kind of like try to get a sense of what the community is working on, or what's new and what's out there, and that really needs demands of you to kind of like focus on that and not maybe really worry about other things like like your financial or like maybe making sure that you've got something to keep the lights on and stuff like that. So being under the umbrella of a company that allows you to focus on the creative aspect of it really is something that is beneficial for me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then you get into the point of like, you know, where you're allocating your mental energy at. Like now you have like this dedicated time to allocate your mental energy to like this one thing versus like, maybe you have a 9 to 5 job and you're doing PLC programming, but then you're also trying to make YouTube videos about PLC programming in the evening time. So it's like two different minds that you have to have whenever you're working on all these different things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's totally correct. Because before then, I was actually working as after I'd left my job as a system integrator, I was working as a consultant in the IIoT space. And although content creation was still something that I considered to be like my primary promotion, primary profession, I still needed to do something else, just to keep that cash flow going. So which kind of like
Yep.
ate a huge chunk of my time, took a huge chunk of my time out of my day. So now it has allowed me to kind of like focus more on the research. So what has really changed a lot for me is the ability to not only communicate about what's out there, but to start to contribute about how to make it better. So I've got more time now to
Mhm.
contribute about how to make it better. So there's a lot of standards debate, as you might be aware. A lot of debates around what do we use, what is best to use, MQTT, is it OPCUA, what is the best tool for this and that. So there's never a clear answer there. So for me, what I'm really focused on mostly is to kind of like really contribute in that space to identify places where I could say this is where this is most suitable to use this particular protocol, and this is where this particular protocol is more suitable to use, and also actively participate in suggesting some edits to the standards committees, standards like Sparkplug committees and OPCUA. So really, for me, that's mostly the focus now, being able to do a lot of research and also actively participate in driving the technology that is being created to solve these problems in manufacturing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really gives you the ability to like become the expert in the thing, right? Like you said, you can now spend your time to research, and even people who work in something daily, like yes, they're an expert in it, but they also a lot of times don't have the ability to step back and then look at the entire like sector or the segment of that sector. Um, and so like it really gives you now the time to like study that sector, and I think study's huge, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some things that I'm doing within our company that like I'm studying particular things I can't really say publicly, but I'm studying
Yeah.
particular things in the industry, and these extra study times that I'm putting in towards these things is hugely valuable, and it's like mind opening to like what's really going on in the industry, like how much you know maybe how much of the industry is using a certain type of product or certain protocols, or and then you can identify things like with this sector as far as like, wow, there's this one product out here that's like much better than this other product, but this other product is the one that's like very very widely used, and then maybe you can latch on to whatever the actual better product is, and start to cast that out to the community and really help promote that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, especially in the industrial automation space, this is where we see a lot of careers that span like maybe 30 years of someone working with one particular product. So if someone is building systems using a particular PLC or a particular software, and it's unlike IT, where you could have someone with a career, 30-year career. It's highly likely that they've touched a bit of everything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now that we've got this new variety, or this new plethora of technologies coming into the industrial automation space, it's really key for you to kind of like step back, as you said, from your normal day to day and using that tool that you've been using for 20 years to try and understand what else is out there, and that kind of like gives you a perspective. So that ability to be able to step back and research, talk to people, find out what others are using, it gives you a different
Mm-hmm.
perspective, to such an extent that you might find an easier solution to some of the problems that you have been struggling with for a long time, and even better ways of solving issues that better than
Yeah.
the way that you've been doing it. So it's really critical for you to step back and actually investigate other technologies and other tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, say, for instance, like, especially with like the automation sector, you have like your robots and your PLCs that, like, you know, especially with like PLCs, I feel like there's a lot of companies that they go with the PLC and they stick with that PLC brand, and like that's all they go with. So whenever there is something like new and emerging in the market, if you're not looking to see this new technology that may just be much better. I don't want to like pick on Alan Bradley, so anybody
Yeah.
from Alan Bradley is watching this, but I've been doing Allen Bradley programming for some time now, and there's a lot of headaches within it. There's a lot of headaches that should not be there, that should be made more simple. And even with Allen Bradley being as costly of a product as it is, I think there's things that they could even still increase the cost of it if they would just take away some of the headaches. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of things when it comes to like version control and like things that just, it's like, why are we still dealing with this? These things should be much simpler at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
What are you kind of seeing for the future of your career?
Yeah, so for me, it's really going to be more of content creation, mostly around research, more research around industrial IoT is best, definitely what I see more for my career, because I would like to believe that this is only the beginning of industrial IoT, because there's so many companies out there that still haven't digitally transformed, that are still in what you'd call Industry 3.0. So I think we're going to see a wave at some point of this massive change where companies are now, because there's a lot of companies who are going to look back and really wonder how they managed to even survive without really implementing these technologies, right? So it's going to become so
Yeah,
commonplace. And for me, in my career, I'm kind of like preparing myself for that by really educating myself and researching about around all these technologies, and also being in a position where I could better advise companies whenever they get to the position where they want to digitally transform. So that's kind of the future that I really see for myself.
very nice, very nice. What do you kind of see for like the Internet of Things and then becoming even more, let's say, like plug and play, right? So like one thing I also see that's an issue in the sector is there's still so many things that have to be manually connected. And when it comes to like let's say for like PLC, when I say manually connected, I mean manually connected through software. Like let's say for instance, like even with like PLC and robot code, like really at this point, like there should be almost standards to the code, right? You shouldn't look inside of every robot and every PLC and it's all programmed differently, right? It should almost be more of, you know, I don't want to say building block, but there's just more structure to it. Because like the big thing is like whenever you go to the Internet of Things, it's like now you have to align all this data, right? Because like whoever programmed on the PLC side of things has their data however they have it, right? And then you're trying to take that to a database, and if that database is not in the same alignment, there's a lot of like manual work that has to go through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you there. So, it's there's a lot of factors involved, when it comes to industrial automation and standards. I think the standards bodies are really doing the manufacturers a disservice by not really being like genuine towards the solving the problem of interoperability and plug and play, because it's not really an issue of technology. If you look at things like USB has been around for a long time now. You can plug a USB on a Mac, on a Windows, it will function pretty much the same way, right?
Yeah,
There's that
yeah,
abstraction. So it's not a matter of whether the technology is there or not. It's about the willingness to really adopt it and come together and agree on one thing and say this is what we're doing. But there's a lot of interest, right? So as far as standards creation are concerned, which really kind of like creates this fragmentation in the ecosystem, and you can't really tell when the standards bodies are come together, or even the big companies are going to come together and say, okay, now enough is enough. Now we need to really put the manufacturers first. So let's put aside all these other differences and frankly look have a different way of looking at it, because right now it's really built around locking the customer in, right? That's really the motivating factor around really keeping these standards closed, to lock the customer in. It's because we haven't really figured a way of really monetizing otherwise, right? So I think once that happens, as it has happened in other sectors like IT, I mean, Apple still sells laptops. Dell still sells a lot of laptops, even though you could still use a USB on this and that. So they figured a way to monetize and really survive
Mm.
without having to lock the customer in by providing added value. So once vendors start to figure out a different business model, I think this is where we're going to see them let go and really allow these systems to really come and play nice together. And then this is where we're going
Yeah.
to have a scenario where we could literally just plug a robot in and then everything is auto configured, production goes, because I don't think it's really a matter of technology advancement. The technology is
Yeah.
already
No.
there.
Yeah.
So to be interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think if definitely if like some major companies like if it was like me personally, from what I see, it needs to be a PLC company because of a lot of times they're like the brain of the operation. Could be a robot company that then comes out with like some type of PLC or something, or they could just even just developing a software layer over top of any of these brands, right? Like where you can, you know, load in different program files that would automatically kind of give more connectivity. Um, this is kind of into like the technical things, but like whenever you plug in your refrigerator, your washer, your dryer, and it's a smart device. Now you go onto the app, you put in your Wi-Fi information, you add the device to your app, and then all the things connect. Right? You know the temperature of your thermostat. All the controls are already there and mapped out. Um, I really think it's kind of just a matter of like you said, like they got to change the business model so they can find another way to monetize. Maybe they go to a subscription software based type of model that can then they can provide these software packages and people can just pay on a monthly basis. Um,
Absolutely.
but I do think that's definitely the future. And something I keep in mind too is like as an automation company, right? And then you have AI. Like at what point do we not program PLCs and robots anymore? How far away is that, and what do we need to do to be adaptive to that market?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, with AI coming into the picture, it really also changes the landscape a lot, especially for automation companies, maybe automation providers specifically, because really a lot of things are going to become a commodity, right? Even just the idea of programming PLC itself, right? That's going to be commoditized, and what's going to be more valuable is really understanding I think domain expertise, like really understanding, because even right now with if you give manufacturers like maybe the same, let's say for example ChatGPT, they won't like leverage it the same way, right? Because for you to really use AI, you need to understand your domain more so that you could know what questions to ask or how to prompt it or how to really apply it. So what's going to become more valuable is going to be that domain expertise and to know what parts are required to make this or what parts are required to manufacture this and understand how to put those together, how to bring them together. That overarching view of understanding the ecosystem, I think, is going to become much more valuable than just like really doing programming and all that kind of stuff. And for manufacturers, it's also going to change really how they interact on a day-to-day basis with like their equipment, and I think things like audio interface, I think we're going to see that audio interface really move into the manufacturing space quite soon, I think, than a lot of AI technologies. That ability to kind of like uh, generate voice commands or put some voice commands to
Yeah.
say, okay, now I need to manufacture so much of this, so much product. And then the AI will just go in there and it knows how to speak to the MES system. It knows how to speak to the PLC. It knows how to speak to this and that. And then it knows also how to speak even to the consumer who has ordered that. Maybe they could actually ask the consumer in real time to say, now you didn't specify this specific thing. What would you need for this and that? Pretty much like a restaurant ordering where you are, it's like a menu that's
Yeah.
customized for you. So I think audio interface is something that I see really happening much sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and especially too, I think that with not even just executives, managers, to be able to say, hey, da 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 da, why is my line down? And be able to get a response back from that of some type of predicted reason why the line's down. Like, it's pretty valuable.
Exactly. I mean, not that ability to not have to wait for like a week or a monthly dashboard to say, okay, this is what we did this week or this is what we did today. I mean, to your point, the ability to just at any given moment just go in there as an executive, say, okay, what's my OEE? What's happening? What's happening here? Why did we not meet our target today, or why is this line lagging? And get an answer instantly and be able to kind of like uh, make some corrective decisions. I think is going to be very critical.
What do you see for those who are looking to get into a career in this industry? What do you think are going to be some key skill sets that they're going to need?
I think it's going to be a combination of a lot of skill sets, right? So, I mean, automation, the understanding of automation technology is still is not going away, right? So you still need to understand, because I see a lot of, I mean, a lot of challenges. Speaking to someone recently was saying, asking me, okay, like a seasoned software developer, right? Saying, why do you need to run software on this piece of hardware? I mean, can that not be done on a computer, right? So that actually kind of like shows you exactly that they don't really have an idea of what really goes on inside a factory. So that knowledge to understand what goes on inside the factory, PLC programming, all that technology is really still very important. And then, but it's not sufficient anymore to have that as a standalone skill to say I'm a PLC programmer. That's it. To then understand IT, because now you're going to see a lot of technologies like maybe, for example, containerization, understanding how to lay the infrastructure for IT, Docker, to understand how to deal with things like Docker. Maybe not things like Kubernetes, because that's even a far much more advanced technique, even for IT itself. But to understand IT infrastructure, to understand some low code uh, tools, like Node-RED, to understand a lot of IT, and also going to the cloud to understand some tools in the cloud platforms, how to use analytics, how to do all that kind of stuff. I think having that broad understanding end to end. This is what I would kind of like. So in IT, they've got the full stack. So this is like the full stack of IoT. I think this is really what I would advise for people who are venturing into this space to really try and get a feel of the entire stack, because without understanding one or the other, it's going to be really hard to compete.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that actually just popped in my mind that I think kind of goes along with that is I think that things are going to become, especially if you talk like 20 years out, things are going to become much more like they are with like a chat GPT, right? You're going to have to learn how to do like prompting things and not just learn how to do prompting things, but like have that type of mindset to think about like, hey, I have this device, I need this data, like how do I interpret what's going on in the real world to take that data and get it back, get it to the cloud, right? But like, what does that mean? What's the mathematics that we need to do on the data? What are all the things we need to do before we send it up to the cloud? And also like understanding some of that infrastructure of like how many sensory devices we're going to need, but really just being able to kind of have like a prompt type of mindset to ask those really intelligent questions to be able to find what actual data you need to look at to get the result you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's totally correct. And it also speaks to the point that domain expertise is going to become even. I kind of like to think about it differently. So I see, I mean, with ChatGPT, a lot of people are now kind of like moving to more to the surface to say, okay, and now I've got this tool, which means it's going to tell me everything. That's I look at it differently. Now that you've got this tool, now it's more important for you to even go deeper into your domain expertise, for you to understand
Yep.
all this, because if you've got no idea of all the sensory elements, or because the physical world is still real, right? It's still there. You still
Yeah.
need to put atoms together to make a product. You still need to move stuff, to ship it. So that physical world is still out there. So you need to start from there to understand it first. This is what sensory mechanism I need to use here, or this is what is being used here. And then when you move up to the higher level, like to ChatGPT, you know precisely what to ask for, or how to command it to do you, or what sort of data you're looking for. Even as an executive, if you have no clue of what a manufacturing operation consists of, what are you going to ask? Are you going to You need to be able to ask things like, to understand. I need to understand quality, and then I need you to compare yesterday quality with what happened on such and such a day, to be able to understand and ask it as if you're asking your employees, people who are really running your enterprise. So domain expertise is going to become even more important with ChatGPT. So those who understand the underlying systems are the ones who are going to even make better use of ChatGPT or AI, as it were.
What do you suggest for people do education wise to get into this type of career path?
So it's education wise, it's really kind of like tricky. So myself, I studied electronic engineering, and I think maybe I'm in a sweet spot, as it were, but I don't have much knowledge about the mechanics of it. So maybe a program that really allows you to, I wouldn't say mechatronics, because that also may be too focused on like the that electronic and mechanical interaction, but rather
Yeah.
a program that allows you to get a feel of like the mechanics, the electronics, the software, and the connectivity aspect of it. I don't know
Mm,
if there's maybe colleges that already offer that kind of program, but again, so it also takes us to the point to say, I don't think maybe college education alone is sufficient now to really
right.
put you in the perfect position for you to be able to compete in today's world. So you could get like any program that will give you that baseline or best understanding. So that could be computer science, it could be electronic engineering, or it
Hmm.
could be chemical engineering, or anything that gives you that underlying. And then you can then kind of like supplement that with a lot of courses that you can find online. There's nano degrees that you can find online. So I think that's
Yeah.
really the form of education that I think is going to win in the 21st century. So it's not going to be more about just going to college, getting the degree, going to work.
Yeah.
That's it. It's going to be more of supplementing it with different forms of knowledge, because you're not going to get that program. It's actually even harder for universities to keep up, right? To even
Right.
kind of like structure that in a way that really makes you competitive enough. So it's really up to you to
Yeah.
upskill yourself.
Yeah. I mean, definitely like my thoughts on college is like really at this point, like most of the things that you'd learn in college, you could learn them much more cost effectively, much quicker, and much more targeted through like courses that are being sold by individuals or some companies that are selling just specific courses for things. Right now, for somebody that's going through the college degree path because they feel like they need to do it or want to do it just to do it. Um, I think a nice thing that people can do that isn't really thought about enough, but it is to utilize some of the electives that you get towards some things that are maybe not on your elective list. Like maybe you have this elective list of electives you can choose from, but a lot of times you can go to your admin and say, "Hey, like I'm actually interested in taking this computer science class instead of I don't know, I'll just say home ec or
Yeah.
something, just some random thing, right? Can I take this computer science class? Because I know if I take computer science, that's at least a little bit more related to like the like data,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna maybe learn a little bit about data and how computers work and how that infrastructure is, and you know, uh, I think it can be really valuable to like pick up that extra little nugget of something else that's a little bit outside of like what your degree was, but it's targeted towards like what your overall career path is mapped out to be.
Exactly, totally agree. Kind of like working your way backwards, right? To be able to understand what it is that you want to do, and then try to see what are the pieces of knowledge that you need to get there. So I totally agree with you there.
Do you have any last points of advice that you'd like to share with the community?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of like reiterate that, so sometimes I know that the idea of IoT and smart manufacturing, digital transformation might come off as like too maybe buzzwords or too pushy or too futuristic, but I mean it's there. It's not going away. So I mean, both for system integrators, really, my advice is to really kind of like look at upskilling yourself and trying to understand all these technologies so that you can stay competitive. Even for
Mhm.
manufacturers, to really consider looking at what digital transformation or smart manufacturing, IoT. It doesn't matter by what name you call it, really, but that idea that you could really connect to your systems, get data, and then generate some insights and be able to act on that data could really transform how you operate your business. So I've done it even at a much uh, 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 smaller scale, like for example, the example that I mentioned to you, just to see moving from like 4 hours per day of downtime to like 0 hours per day of downtime. That's something for a small batch manufacturing company to get that. So you could imagine for a company of a large scale, all the holes that they could fill just by really
Mhm.
moving to digital transformation could really save tons of money and really put them at a very competitive edge. So, and for those coming out of college, it's manufacturing is changing, right? It's no longer the manufacturing of way back where I know it was really not even myself. Like I've always been fascinated by robotics, robots, like in my early years, but I really didn't picture myself in a manufacturing wasn't a goal for me, but I was just fascinated by robots. So robots are what really brought me to manufacturing, but manufacturing environment itself didn't really fascinate me that much. So, but I think it's changing now because at least all these tools, as we mentioned earlier, all these tools, because there's something more satisfying by, for example, using ChatGPT to move things in the physical space, in the real world, like giving commands
Yeah.
and then seeing something. It's different to just talking on your phone or on your computer and then getting feedback via text. But there's something more satisfying by commanding a robot using AI, and then you could literally
Yeah.
see things moving. So I think that in itself will attract a lot of talent. And my advice is for really for people who are talented or looking to move into AI, there's opportunity to really apply your AI skills in manufacturing in a way that is far much more satisfying than some, frankly speaking, ways that companies like Google AI, Google, Facebook are using for things like advertising, which sometimes is controversial and not really something that I personally would find satisfying. But to be able to move products, to be able to move robots and manufacture something and really transform industry or really how humanity functions, it's something that I think it's really exciting to be a part of. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the technology for sure is gonna bring people to the industry, and it's really what's gonna excite people and invigorate them. Like early on in my career, I remember when I walked into my first like manufacturing facility that had like 100 plus robots. I was just like, it was like I walked into an amusement park. I
yeah,
was like, holy cow, this is crazy, you know. And so, like being able to people to be able to experience that, that's like a selling point on its own, and to get people fired up and excited about, coming to work every day
absolutely.
and to choose a career in this field. But yeah, where can people find you at?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn most of the time, Kudzai Manditereza. And then I'm also have got a YouTube channel, industry40.tv, and website. So this is basically where you could find me and all of my other contact details. This is where you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Malakai. It was such a great pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, likewise. Likewise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.